at that top of the hour. Well, we'll wait till we hit that mark. Here comes Phil Lynch. Well, enjoy the reading, everyone. I know I'm going to enjoy the reading, and I'm again, very, very grateful for you all returning to our modest platform for our reading today. Thanks again. And of course, thanks to Kim and Don for helping out, as they always do, to make this possible for all of us together on our Sundays. Right before there we go. All right, I'm ready to go. Don, you're ready to go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, good evening, bienvenidos, dear friends. You have joined our live poetry program here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And here in the United States, this upcoming week is the largest gathering of poets, fiction writers, creative nonfiction writers, and teachers, and all kinds of intersections among those of all the cross genre and hybridity. We'll be gathering actually here just 60 miles north of where I am in Olympia, Washington, for the Associated Writing Program's annual conference. And as a result of that, we wanted to have a superior lead in to the conference, and also not have our new book showcase land the same weekend that the conference is just getting out. So you have joined us for a most special and auspicious opening to our March month of poetry, mayhem, and madness for our new books showcase today. Well, I am your host, Sandy Yannone, here joining you from the Pacific Northwest, Olympia, Washington, and we will be featuring today in our new books showcase. Well, what can I say? To me, the Fab Four. Fab Four. Andrea Deeken, Sinead McClure, Kim Parsons, and Liz All. All of them have joined us numerous times with great fanfare and amazing poetry. And as I was telling the group a little earlier, before we came on live to the program, I'm particularly excited about the prospects of hearing the intersections of how these four poets will converse with one another. It's truly thrilling for me to be able to bring the four of them together for this reading, this, for me, afternoon. Well, we'll be hearing from each of the four poets, a little bit of chit chat from me to introduce each of them to you. So without further ado, let's get this party started. Well, first we have today the truly amazing Andrea Deeken. I'm so grateful that we've been able to connect through Cultivating Voices live poetry, and mainly was brought to the platform because of her award-winning chapbook from Slapering Hall Press. And Margot Taft Stever had said, oh, we want to bring this poet to Cultivating Voices. Can we get her on the program? And I was like, sure. And has truly become like a favorite here. Always so thrilled when Andrea can join us here on the program. And if I'm not mistaken, this is, I think, your third or fourth time. I know I'm one off there. Appearance. It's so great to have her with us today, and a little bit more formally about her accomplishments as a poet. Andrea Deeken is the author of the chapbook Mother Kingdom, winner of the 2021 Slapering Hall Press chapbook competition, and a finalist in the poetry chapbook category of the 2022 International Book Awards. Her writing has appeared in Beltway Poetry Quarterly, Beyond Queer Words, the Blue Mountain Review, Ran Off with the Star Bassoon, Spoon River Poetry Review, Valley Voices, and numerous places elsewhere. And it just seems so fitting to have her open up our reading today as we open up Women's History Month and heading into International Women's Day later this week. I'm so excited to introduce her. She's a former book editor and has worked for the Multnomah County Library for 15 years. She currently lives in Portland, Oregon with her wife and daughter. Welcome.
Wow, Sandy, thank you. That's perhaps the best introduction I think I have ever received. The Fab Four, I love that. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to be invited back and to be reading with these fabulous poets. I want to say hey to my parents who are in the audience. I just saw my stepmom and my dad. Hey, you guys. So I'm joining you live from my workday at the library, but don't worry, I am taking vacation time. I'm not just like skipping out on my workday. So, but I wanted to read you some poems from my chapbook, Mother Kingdom, which actually this month is celebrating its first birthday. It's been in the world for exactly 1 year, which means that this year's winner's chapbook, her name is Tara Flint Taylor. She's one of my dear friends and now is a pressmate with Slapering Hall Press. Her chapbook just came out. It's coming out now. It's called Bone Wishing. It is phenomenal. We're going to be at AWP, actually, at the Slapering Hall Press table. So if you want to see any of the other wonderful Slapering Hall Press chapbooks. Oh, in May. Great. That's great, Sandy. She'll be joining in May at this reading. But we'll be there in Seattle next weekend if you want to see any of these chapbooks in action. They're really beautifully printed and edited and cared for. So I thought I would read you a couple of poems from this collection, but then also I have a couple new things I'm working on if you'll humor me for that. But so the Mother Kingdom is kind of about motherhood, but it's also about being a mother to yourself. It's about queerness. It's about identity and kind of generational inheritance. It's about a lot of things. But the first poem I want to read is called Evolution. And this one has a dear place in my heart because it was actually the first poem I wrote that would eventually become this chapbook. And when I wrote it, I don't think I knew it was the start of something. But so whenever I read it, I just have a fond gratitude for its existence. So it's called Evolution. The setting is my childhood home environment in Missouri and out in the country on the Osage River. And the setting is a lot of times my father would go hunting for arrowheads near our house. And that's where the poem begins. So this one is Evolution. Was it when I followed my father to the fields, his back hunched, searching for arrowheads, my feet sinking in the newly turned earth? Or was it seeing my mother from the doorway, her back a waning crescent in the dark? Words came easily to me then, alone with paper, my mind a sweet shadow, time a blanket around my shoulders. But coming out my mouth, they choked and stumbled, my face the crushed color of cherries stuck to the bottom of a boot. When I told my father I was gay, he was chopping radishes, their red skins half moons on the cutting board, little gleams of white like a promise worth keeping. His careful hands slicing, their rough wintered edges that held so many things, dogs, babies, stones the color of starlight, my wild heart beating the knife's calm rhythm. What can I fix you to eat? My mother was not so easy. Her face pinched pale in the thick dark of her bedroom, thin covers, a moat of righteous limbs, and I, the only sinner. Even now, all these years later, my heart closes when I hear her voice. Today it's cold, but the crocuses are coming up, ochre pollen petals, small as thimbles. Soon the geese will head back north, their black wings cutting through soundless cloud. Okay, the next one I'm going to read is called First Kill. Thank you. So when I grew up an only child, but then when I was about 13, my parents divorced and my dad remarried, and then I got 6 siblings all at once, all at the same time. So this poem called First Kill, the setting is a deer stand in the woods, and I'm with my brand new brother I just have gotten. This is called First Kill. On the inside, the deer stand was surprisingly small. White bucket in the corner, wet sawdust and piss. The thrill of being alone with him, this new brother I had gotten just weeks before by way of a second marriage, 4 days apart, the two of us, born the same month and year. My father had taken us hunting. Anything could happen. I don't know who saw it first, but soon it was in our hands as we stood side by side, holding the magazine, curling at the edges. All those women, and our eyes on them like magnets. When my father returned with a doe, calling and calling our names, we scampered down the steps, guilty children, our minds already on dinner. Years would pass before I knew the soft rumblings in my body could begin to speak its impossible language. But in the deer stand, the crickets were loud in my ears. The humid air stuck to my skin as I carefully turned the pages. My new brother, just inches from my molting body, its pimpled cheeks and long coltish legs, our heads bowed as if in prayer. That night, we dined like kings. Let's see. I think, so for the next poem, I'm going to switch gears and do kind of like more of a motherhood poem. I have a 9-year-old and it's a wild age. She's definitely becoming her own person. And when she was about 6, she was very obsessed with rocks. We kind of are all obsessed with rocks in my family. I think it's maybe, genetic, but so this one day she was trying to stack these rocks in a perfect way. We were at a river near our house called the Columbia in Portland, where we live, and nothing was going right. And so this poem kind of starts in that moment. It's called We Carry Stones with Seasons Inside Them. Newly 6, my daughter fills her fists with rocks to stack from the bruised edge of the Columbia, just north of our house in the city. She squints and stomps like a displeased general. Everything has gone wrong. The wind and water stretch around us, a large lumbering animal rubbing its eyes. It will be fall in a few weeks. Mama, they are too small, she says, not flat enough for the fierce towers in her mind. Her legs blur as she charges ahead. Soon she is on to the next item of business, but I'm left searching. How much she starts that I take on as my own, what motherhood is, the push and pull of waves at the shore. I pocket those that call to me, mostly smooth ones giving me a kind of peace, probably the closest thing to prayer I've ever felt, river rock to skin. We walk to the top of the boat ramp, jagged concrete ridges reminding me of the time when I was 7 or 8 and played hide and seek with the summer people, a half-mile from our house on the Osage. I don't remember if I was it when I fell, slicing my knee on those steep steps, blood caught in the grooves. I looked for a boat full of people, coolers and catfish, tackle hanging off the sides. Instead, there was only murky water, bloated bugs, and old beer cans, my blood. Someone's cousin carried me all the way, running toward our cabin at the end of the tree-lined gravel. Windows dark, the dogs barking. It's bad. You're gonna need stitches. My sweaty hands held his neck. Already shrinking into myself, I shrugged it off, a summer blossom closing at dusk. At the hospital, they gave me 6 stitches. The boy had been right. It was my body, and I was the last to know. Thank you. Let's see. I think for closing, I have a few new ones. I'm working on my first full-length collection, which I kind of imagine like extending from the themes of the chapbook, but then also kind of moving out beyond to kind of connect to more of like the universal experience. So this poem is called, it's called Strength. And actually it's really interesting because it came from a prompt where the prompt is that you take the first line of an Emily Dickinson poem. So the first line of this poem is from Emily Dickinson and the rest is all mine. And this one is called Strength, which is also the name of the prompt. It's easy to invent a life. Don't they know all they ask of me? Isn't it enough to take your 2 capable hands, buoyed by time, each warm callus spreading sadness on my tired cheeks, nothing like the moment when we first met? I can still remember how I saw you cross that crowded bar, as if lit spectacularly from above. Watched your back enter the night, an open door, the summer streetlights igniting one by one before us, until they created something brand new, a constellation right above your windshield. My heart quietly alert for the first time in years. If only we could go back to that moment, remember its kind of thrilling recognition. Forget the dishes left standing in the sink, whose turn it is to take out the garbage, find the remote under the crumbs of what's left of our old couch, our old dog, our oldest child, our older bones. Let's see, that was Strength. How much time do I have? I'll read this other one too. This one I'm still working on. It's also a prompt from the same series. It was a submission series I'm working on. And this one was, the prompt was, what if you could describe a difficult feeling or emotion as a physical presence, like a physical being? And I think I'm gonna do 2 more. So this one is called The Devil. And it's my kind of attempt at a prose poem, which is something I'm still kind of learning how to do. Okay. My anxiety is a wiry thing, thin and vibrating. You sense him coming before you see him. He usually stays in the shadows, doorways, stairwells. Constantly on the edges of my vision, he's like trying to find the end of a rainbow or to get a dog to come back after it's run away. You can't move forward too fast. It was years before I understood that buried beneath him, hiding just out of sight, was anger itself. Surprisingly small, she was only the size of a peach pit and covered in spines. I didn't recognize her at first, partly because she had been covered with her own kind of sadness, a blanket as heavy and silent as the foot of snow outside my window, the snow my daughter plays in so effortlessly. My daughter can make a game out of anything, a stick, a rock, a pile of pine cones left for a rabbit she saw only this morning. I wonder what would happen if we gave our anger this kind of care, cradled her like an infant or even a friend, made space for her long arms, her putrid breath, and snarling teeth, if we held her close anyway, gave her a name the way I was given my first name at the base of an altar I no longer believe in, the cool water cascading over my forehead, blessing me as a once wanted child. In the car at night, the moon looks like it's following us, but really we're the ones throwing ourselves through space, launching our hopes into the sky with closed eyes. These days, when I see my anxiety on the street, I no longer look away. I try to reach into my pockets. I want to give him something. I still worry it won't be enough. Okay, I think I have one more if there's time. This one's also new. It's called The Grief Factory. And it was sort of like, I was imagining if grief was something tangible you could hold in your hands. And this one's my last poem. Thank you for having me. Okay, The Grief Factory. At first, stones, rows of them, the quiet calm, the trajectory of the conveyor belt, the hands of the workers adjusting for shape and size. The Grief Factory keeps odd hours. It is usually open in the dead of night. Stone after stone passed down the moving belt, a living record of the grief the world has made. Backs bent to the never-ending task of assembly to what has been lost. An absence of touch, the sound of your mother's voice, and how their hands could be my own. In the Grief Factory, they are churning out sadness in the shape of small stones. They number in the hundreds, pile up at the workers' feet. Their job is to stack them until the rocks become a wall, too high to climb, until they begin to run out of room. So unaccustomed is the world to love. One day I filled in at the factory, and after 8 hours on the floor, I looked down in shock. Instead of river rocks, smooth and heavy at the throat, ripe for stacking, suddenly there were flowers, purple petals, stamens long and yellow, falling in soft piles at my feet. Each and every rock my heart had once held for you now turned to flowers in my hands. And that's when I knew you were really gone, forever lost to me, and all the ways you've chosen to use your love as a weapon, a garden growing in the feet of my letting go. Thank you.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. We're talking about the hearts here. Andrea Deeken, another smashing reading, right out of the park. The happy birthday to Mother Kingdom. I was telling people in the chat that our mode here is that a new book what qualifies as a new book is a book that's within 1 year of its publication date. So you like hit it like right on the mark. You may be the only person that has hit it exactly on the day to that 1 year. And just so much richness. I was thinking about what you were saying about using the Emily Dickinson first line as a prompt. And ironically, when I was saying earlier, like what is going to be the interesting constellation of how you all are going to intersect? And I was immediately taken to a moment where I was sitting in a coffee shop in Lincoln, Nebraska, as you're reading your poem, where I don't know if Kim Parsons remembers this, but we did the same prompt and wrote poems together from First Lines by Emily Dickinson. And the line was, "The rope the knights were put across." And I can still see us writing our poems in that coffee shop, the mill. And then all the stones that populate your poetry, they're really a talus there. The cairns, as like the building of the cairns, beautiful, beautiful new work. And of course, the delight that we and the joy that we have to be able to hear from Mother Kingdom again. And I hope we'll hear from it again and more new work very soon. A reminder, everyone, of course, as you already are doing, please leave your comments, your support, your love of the lines of poetry and the poets offering in the chat for us today. And of course, you are listening here to Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. It's our new books showcase. So if you do have the resources, I can think of no better gift to bestow upon another person than a collection of poetry, and to give yourself a gift. You also are worthy of a gift. So if you have the resources today, I hope you will utilize the links to that we have provided to you to purchase today's collections. They will also appear tomorrow on our Facebook page for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. And we hope that you will be adding some of these fabulous collections today to your poetry collection. It is always beautiful to feature chapbooks. And the one other final thing I'll say about the connections that populate this reading today is that we have two folks who have winners of the Slapering Hall Press chapbook competition here amongst us. So we bookended today with Andrea, and Liz also has a collection from Slapering Hall. So great to feature the work of chapbooks as well as full-length collections. Thank you so much again. And I look forward to seeing you this upcoming week at AWT. Well, we will now travel far, far, far across the continental US, go across the Atlantic and that wild Atlantic way and head over to hear from Sinead McClure. Sinead and I share really an amazing feat, which is we were the co-winners in Not the Time to Be Silenced, like first 5-word competition. And I was like, oh yeah, it was no contest. It was really Sinead's all the way. But the other thing about, in addition to the poetry, of course, Sinead can wear a hat like nobody's business, which I always appreciate, as you know. I'm thrilled to have Sinead join us back. Sinead, you're coming off of a recent reading with us with your collaborator, and I just happy to have the book here because this is the book that we are featured, but I want to give a little plug to the songs I sing are sisters, and there it is right behind her. So, so glad that you can join us today with your new collection. And let me tell you a little bit more as we'll get to hear from Sinead. Sinead McClure is a writer, radio producer, and illustrator. She's been published in the Stinging Fly, Southward, Ink, Sweat, and Tears, Meat for Tea, The Valley Review, Live Encounters, and many, many, many other fine publications worldwide. As well, she's co-authored the poetry collection, The Songs I Sing Are Sisters, which was winner of the Dreich Classic Chapbook Award with Cat O'Neill McCullough. Sinead is also the 2022 winner of the Roscommon Chapbook Award. Again, beautiful to be featuring chapbooks today with her collection, The Word According to Crow. In 2022, she placed first in the English language section of the Kavali Poetry Competition, and she is studying for a master's degree in creative practice at the Yates Academy in Sligo. It is always, always an incredible pleasure and honor to be able to hear your voice on our program. Welcome, and thank you for being here. And congratulations.
Thank you so much, Sandy. My hat twin, you wear a hat very well indeed yourself. And to Don and Kim for Cultivating Voices, because it's without Lime Square Cultivating Voices that The Word According to Crow probably wouldn't exist. You give voice to us, and you gave voice at a time when most of these poems were being written, where we found it very difficult to share our work, obviously during those pandemic years of 20 and 2021. So this is kind of like a mini launch for me in a way, being here with you. It's kind of the first time, although I've had a launch. The book was published back in October and it was launched in County Roscommon. But this is my first online launch, and I can't think of a better place to do it but here with you people. It's really an honor to be here. The book, I suppose you could say, deals with my religion, which is nature. It also hints at my lapsed religion and casts maybe a slightly cold eye on being brought up as a Catholic in Ireland back in the 60s and 70s. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the first opening poem, which is called The Word According to Crow, after the title. And if you see this illustration I've done here of the 7 crows that are native to Ireland, and you'll hear about them now in this poem. The Word According to Crow. Rooks do good mimicry, but this orator is no priest. Collarless and open-beaked, he shifts his weight on the steeple. His sermon, a daily litany of caws and trills. Nearby, a swallow threeps thoughts on Africa, fears of the journey, the hot flight across the Sahara. She asks for blessings turning north. The rook ignores her. He waits for his brother's responses. The raven in the mountain, I am here. The orange-beaked chough by the sea, I am here. The hoodie on the high wire, I am here. The jackdaw waving from the chimney, I am here. The jay, half dressed in electric blue, I am here. Above them, a kestrel circles, writes to day's first catch, wing to cloud, one for sorrow. A black and white streak of cirrus crow evaporates to silence. This, thank you. This, you can hear that, unfortunately, the magpie was the one that got it in that poem. This next poem, I suppose, deals with instead of just casting off what you believe in, maybe paying homage to the beliefs of other people. And it is written for my husband, Joe. This is called The Padre and the Plantation. I'll tie him to a tree, you answered, when the woman in the gift shop in Knock asked where you'd place his graven image. Her face spoke tongues of bemusement as we left laughing, the Padre wrapped in brown paper, tucked under your arm. He was your mother's favourite. Lichen touches everything up here. The dry stone wall jigsawed together, a puzzle nearly lost beneath the cloth of algae and the thick air of evergreen plantation. Padre Pio never did get tied to a tree. When he started to get better, he became sainted on the best shelf with a view overlooking the garden. There's a void in the forest where the trees failed to prosper, a small clearing. This is where I genuflect. Thank you. A lot of the poems from Crow were thought about, constructed maybe, percolated while I walked. And as I said, many of them were written during those dark days of the pandemic. And in Ireland, for a time, we had a 5-kilometre limit in which to walk in. So I kind of got to know my area very much more than I had done in all the years that I've lived in the west of Ireland. But we are close to Women's History Month and International Women's Day. And I think one thing that is universal for women is when we walk on our own, we often find it a fearful experience sometimes. You're looking over your shoulder, you know, you look at people in a different way. And I have walked on my own. I prefer to walk alone. And I walked on my own in the early 90s when many women went missing in Ireland. And I remember so clearly coming back on the last bus once from Enniskerry in County Wicklow, and the bus driver saying to me, scolding me, in fact, that I shouldn't be out alone at that time of the night on the last bus. Remember what happened to Annie. And none of us knew what happened to Annie. But this was Annie McCarrick, who was an American woman who went missing while walking in the Wicklow Hills. And she has been gone 30 years this month. To those who know the ending. I write murder mysteries while I walk. Today, the perpetrator is the tall, tin man in the black gabardine who crosses to stop in my path, terrier pointing ditchward. I move quick, refuse to look behind. He doesn't know I'm onto him. The bystander, the witness who'll create his perfect photo fit, the arched expression, those rookish shoulders, that syphilitic nose. One day I wrote the story of the missing jogger. The lady lapped me on my circular walk, road, forest, road, forest, road, gone. Taken on the quietest part where the trees touch. The false alarms, the car that slowed, turned, sped away, the man who would be Stephen King, if not lost in my rural spot, caught me up, passed me by. Most readers of my mysteries wonder why these are unsolvable crimes, why nobody remembers anything, why no clues are left behind. I try to resolve this on shorter walks, end up in circles again. There's no conclusion, just a constant reworking of scenario, unknown antagonists, and a plea to the orbital characters to speak, the gnawing in the pit of your stomach, the bit that grates when you see another appeal, the story that waits for your deathbed confession, the secrets you take when you walk. Thank you. Just gonna have a little sup. just a couple more poems. Birds fly in and out of my poems. Sometimes I don't even know they're there until I've written them. They just happen. And you mentioned at the beginning, Sandy, I am doing for my troubles a master's degree at Sligo, ATU. And birds have taken over once more, and I think they're going to be with me solidly for the next 8 months. This is the poem that came first in the Cahalbui Poetry Competition 2022 on the anatomy of birds. We could be birds, femurs, vertebrae, kneecaps, not for kneeling on, funny bones, sometimes noble with our crowns and our crests, throats sore from shaping song instead of speech, bellies full, bellies emptied, bent at the scapula, only in the rain. Warm blood does not make a mammal. Birds could just as easily be boats. High keels and a trailing edge of underwing touching the half-frozen water as colourful sails, ice split in those splashes. Birds are a puzzle, an abacus of digits at their wingtips, feet and feathers, hallux and coverts. In Florida, a Baltimore oriole eats grape jelly and fresh oranges as bright as his breast. In Australia, a lyrebird mimics the sounds of chainsaws to impress his mate. In my garden, a robin pretends to be a dead relative in exchange for mealworms. Thanks. There's I talk about a lot of animals and birds in the book, and a lot of them happen around the place I live in, and I see them all the time. But there are other animals I worry about across the world. This is my brother, the orangutan. When I left the forest, I left my brother behind, but he didn't mind. He liked the way the trees spread upwards to the sky. They travel up so high, he'd say. You'd often find him there, hugging the stars, his furry shadow embossed by their light. Right up there he was. It was where he slept, his hammock, an intricate nest in the curve where branch met trunk. He told me he kissed the trees. Thank them for keeping me safe, he'd say. They are my sky. They are my home. They are my larder. And the soft fruit spilled from his lips. When we came back to the forest, we forgot our brother, the orangutan. We cut his house, we took his food, we left him too far from his sky. And the soft fruit spilled from my lips, he said. I'm going to leave you with the final poem in the collection, and a little bit more hopeful, I think, than the others. This poem was published last year in Southward in Cork at the Munster Literature Centre, and it is called Dreamcatcher. The day you moved the Dreamcatcher from the shed it had hung in for 20 years, I knew we were letting go of ourselves. Wild things took over. Fields filled up easily. Buttercups in May, meadowsweet in July, purple-headed self-heal a mat beneath the apple trees. When I threw out the dying chrysanthemums, one clung to the nettle bed, still breathing, and the forest became itself again. Now there is a cadence to our steps and joined up writing in the sky as we traipse the sun and its long shadow paths. The Dreamcatcher takes our harshest winters, holds tight to spin forever from the elder. Thanks so much for having me. Really looking forward to listening to the next two poets.
That is Sinead McClure. The word according to crow. And I'm so glad you ended with Dreamcatcher. It's a poem that I delighted in when I read it in Southward, which I just happen to have had right behind me, and I was looking at it earlier this week, and you know, it's interesting, the you know, the power of what we bring to our own view of the world and our obsession. I'm thinking of Andrea and the Stones, and your collection using the kaleidoscope of birds, and you know, it's just so interesting to watch how we can breathe life in so many ways to a singular focus on something, and the prismatic way we keep looking, we keep looking at it, and learn more and more as we go. It's in this, I always think about, of course, for me, like the Titanic, and I think I can't possibly write another poem about the Titanic, and yet, or boats in general, and yet these things that grab our spirits, they are infinite wells, and I just admire and love the infinite well of how your poems take flight. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, the word according to Crow. Sinead McClure. Beautiful, beautiful reading. Thank you so much. And if you've not heard of this book, I'll send you an email, but there's a gorgeous book called When Women Were Birds by Terry Tempest Williams. It's a memoir-ish book, and I think everyone in the room here would appreciate that book as well, in companion with just those stunningly beautiful poems. Thank you. The musicality as well. Oh. Well, this is why I come to Cultivating Voices live poetry almost every Sunday, is to hear these amazing voices. And our next reader is, I'm almost speechless with joy to be able to feature Kim Parsons in our new book showcase. Kim is a poet who has generously used the clock for years to bring her poetry forward. And I will never, ever forget, of course, seeing you on one of the earliest Cultivating Voices live poetry after not having heard your poetry for many years, and just marveling at how your voice and your poetry had continued to flourish, and be on this journey with you to your debut collection, the Mayapple Forest. It's for me one of the great joys of the pandemic was to see this collection come into being, and to be able to share that with you, and now to be able to have you on the program with your new collection. When you doggedly, devotedly have been supporting the voices of so many poets with their new collections. So it's a special moment and a delight to be able to introduce you all to a person who needs no introduction, in terms of that you know her well, you know her poems well, and now we'll get to hear from her debut collection and a little more in the formal way about Kim Parsons. Well, after 30 years as a professor, teacher, and school librarian, Kim Ports Parsons now spends as much time as possible on the reading, writing, and sharing of poetry. And aren't we all the better for her time well spent? She lives next door to Shenandoah National Park, and whether she's gardening or daydreaming, she is listening for new poems. Her work has been nominated for the Pushcart and appears in a variety of print and online publications, such as Vox Populi, Poetry Ireland Review, Swim Every Day, and December. Her debut collection, The Mayapple Forest, was published by Terrapin Books in 2022. Kim volunteers weekly for Cultivating Voices live poetry. And as I always say, and I will say it once again, the program would not exist without Kim and Don. I am so pleased and proud to introduce Kim Ports Parsons for our listening pleasure and beautification and edification this evening for some of you. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, my dear friend. Thank you. Thank you, Sandy and Don, for this group, which played a huge role in the creation of this book and into bringing me back into community with other poets, and kind of reclaiming poetry in my life. I can't even begin to express my gratitude for that. I also want to thank the other poets today whose work I adore, and it is such an honor and thrill to be reading with you today. In honor of Women's History Month, I'm going to begin with a poem, just a part of a poem, about one of my most admired heroes, in this case, a musical hero. She was my mother's favorite singer and musician. She was entirely unique, Ella Fitzgerald. And this comes from a poem, Ella, Two Ways. I'm just going to read the first part today to kind of emphasize that I want to talk about women's history as it appears in my own poetry today in a variety of ways. Mama takes me to hear her sing when I'm 18, Ella's 66, and my mother's a teenager again. Ella glides on stage in a long orange spangled gown, round glasses flashing, and she pours out the gold. Forget arthritis, forget worn out, forget things to do, forget supper to cook, forget this battle or that. Forget it. If one of Ella's records starts to play, Mama's spine sits up and takes notice, her knees bounce and her feet start to hop. Ella's singing, Ella's swinging, Ella's making the living easy. Now the brightest spangles are the ones flying out of Ella's throat, charging the air all the way to the nosebleeds, blowing down the theater walls behind us, from the first stretched and twisted tones to the last, showering everything with syncopated stardust. The Mayapple Forest is dedicated to my mother. And there are many poems about her and my relationship with her, my caretaking of her as she was ending her life, as her life was ending, and my grieving process after she had passed. But other women appear in the poems as well, a sister, grandmother, and so on, friends. And I'm really grateful to Diane Blockward and Terrapin Books for believing in this book. And I hope you enjoy, the few poems I'm going to share today. This next one is about the way women often pass flowers and gardens on from one generation to the next, and how it is a kind of family history and a sharing of the appreciation of beauty and the natural world. And this poem is called The Daily Subtraction of Grief. And in my own family, I know this is not unique. Many of the things growing in my garden grew in the home place where I grew up, in that garden that my mother built. And many of those plants she transplanted from her auntie, from her cousin, and so on. And it's a thread that passes down through the generations. The daily subtraction of grief. Turn my back to the sun to bring the scissors into focus. Then cut 5 peonies and 1 bud from the lowest branches of the same plant which grew in the backyard for 47 years. Before that, who knows how long, how many decades, by Aunt Minnie's front porch. Make the cuts about 10 inches down the stem to fill the old vase which sat on grandmother's console beside her collection of 6 brass bells. Don't try to count the petals, soft white surrounding finite pink centers marked with 3 bright stigmas like a trinity of Mama's red lipsticks. So many more flowers were transposed from the home place. But today, just pick these. It's impossible to calculate how long their presence will carry me over, or the number of times I will bring my face down to the peonies to solve for a fragrance equal to the missing total of my mother's ceaseless heart. That's the daily subtraction of grief. A few poems in the book relate to a wild plant, not a garden plant, the Mayapple. And behind me is a photograph of the painting Mayapples by Francis Coates, from which the cover, not quite able to see it, too much camouflage going on there, from which the cover was taken. And several poems in the book relate to Mayapples. It's a plant that I became fascinated by. It seemed to be filled with many layers of meaning for me. It grows in colonies close to the ground. It's a perennial. It comes back, seems to disappear every fall completely, and then emerges miraculously in spring. It is entirely poisonous. The roots all the way to the blossoms, which eventually evolve into these small fruits. And yet, when they are perfectly ripe, the juice can be used to make sauce and jam. And there was something about these plants that just completely fascinated me. So I'm going to share 2 poems related to Mayapples. The first one is called Mayapple Jelly. And again, it relates in much of women's history is the history of family and home and relationships and what's passed from generation to generation, from mother to daughter, and is unwritten and undocumented. And I think sometimes when I'm writing, I'm trying to do some of that documenting. It's also related to a personal grief of never being able to bear the daughter that I long to have. Mayapple jelly. It's also a pantoum for those of you who like form. Despite the name, there's no fruit in May. It ripens mellow and rare under July's ragged umbrella. You need 2 cups, pectin, sugar, and lemon. Stir the honey guava, simmering yellow. Strain away the poison of the pulp, seeds, and skin. Taste the singular fruit, sweet and sour, thickened by pectin. Consider its names: raccoonberry, ground apple, wild mandrake. Strain life's poisons. It's finished when you skim a spoon and
Oh, folks, I'm so sorry.
Some days small spoonfuls are cathartic. When a life drops, edges scrape like tectonic plates. Mayapple roots grow underground in winter, their poison, cytostatic, meaning cells that won't divide. Shelve your losses, taste spoonfuls in remembrance. Wait for the sweetness, memory's calf. Mothers may teach daughters how to smooth edges, how to placate pain, how to keen a song of naming, how loss ripens the self. So that's Mayapple jelly, and I'm going to take a moment and step away from the book to share a new poem. It's called Housing the Body, and there's an epigraph taken from the diary of my great-great-grandmother, Lucinda Alice Blake, who lived from 1860 to 1946, and who spent 14 years living in a covered wagon in Oklahoma Territory in a group of wagons. They were buffalo hunting during a very horrible period in American history when the government was paying for buffaloes to be killed, hunted and killed. And so this quote comes from her diary. The title is Housing the Body. Quote, as the women applied home remedies and nursed the sick in a doctorless country, so the men took care of the sick animals, end quote. A thin line of morning light hangs over her bed. Chip smoke clings to her blankets, and she cups the water dipper. Her stepmother holds her head. November is falling from the north. There is no kill laid out in camp. Days last summer, skins dried in the sun for what seemed like acres, and she jumped from one to the next under the wide sky. This is her second try, the test of a wife, only 17. She is in between pulls. Subtle John is out with the other men, chasing a herd of deer. He'll stay away till it's over. She holds her belly, Annie's hands around hers. She thinks of old Hamp, how the poor mule couldn't eat, how her father threw him on his back to look in his mouth, knocked out his bad tooth with a chisel and hammer. She imagines a house fields, rooms to settle in. The wind cuts hard here. The pain comes again, the hard breathing, the strain. The cut marks on the wagon frame look like deer running, she tries to say, but her body clenches and there is red under her eyelids, then yellow. I know, honey, I know, Annie soothes. Hamp died anyway. Lucinda knows they will skin him and tan his hide. She knows in buffalo camp, everything must be used. So some actual history there from my own family. And I share that with you. It's a new piece I'm working on. I'm trying to go back and find some poems to explore some of the painful history related to my family and the regions my families have lived in. And I'm going to come back now to the book and to the poem, the title poem, The Mayapple Forest. And well, I hope you can follow along. The Mayapple Forest. She does not walk in bare feet on damp leaves, light on spongy ground. She does not cup a pale green bud, still and swelling in her curious palm. She comes and goes, looks at me with large brown eyes she doesn't have, eyes like her father's. When she does not smile, her dimples show like mine. My daughter, Lucy Rose, the one I do not have. Lucinda for my great-great-grandmother. Rose for old-fashioned, rambling ones, yellow as rich cream, simply petaled and fragrant. We don't hold hands or turn around the fairy ring of mushrooms rising in the orchard. She does not remind me to sit by the stream to let my mind move with the watery light. The Mayapples rise as the wheel turns, lifting their shining shoulders. One morning not there, the next dozens of glistening sheaths pushing up from the womb of the forest floor. Leaves closed as the stem lengthens, all sprung from one root, connected, slowly unfolding, opening bright umbrella cells, almost in unison, waxy and wrinkled, discovering their shape, then flexing out fully, tip to tip, a green quilt of 6 pointed stars at my feet. Lucy Rose doesn't know why she's drawn here when she doesn't come walking. She does not ask me to lie down here on the reassuring earth, though I do as she says. Be very still, be an acorn falling. Here, underneath, look up. Breathe in the singular flowers nodding from the axil of 2 leaves on the female stems. Pale chiffon faces across the colony turned each to each. 1 or 2 facing slightly away, lost in thought. Circle of children gathering to play under a bright moon, pale stones set just so in a shaded garden. I do not see her moving beneath this tender sky, inches above the litterfall. I do not see her as she touches a stalk here or there, or as she reaches to finger the first pale fruit. She is not listening to the oak and its saplings. She does not call me to join her. She leaves no shadow. She doesn't turn back. Farther and farther into the dappled tangle until she might be just a leaf rustling under the Mayapple forest. The world accepts its own dying, recreates itself, cell by cell. I'm just going to read one more from the book. It's the time of year here in the Virginia woods where tiny, tiny bits of life are emerging. And those first plants are called ephemeras. And, pollinators count on them to get them started in the early spring. They always make me think about how everything is so fleeting. So this poem is called Ephemera. Red dawn on the mountain, light filtering bare trees, bloodroot, hepatica, trout lily, fungal blooms waking the ants, match flames of spring. Bees still drowsy with cold, taking first sips. Waning moon crossing a window, a kiss before sleep. Sleep itself, or any kiss, or any night, or the mystic lantern of a dream, glowing from core to fingertips. Words blading a page, swirling mayflies, a feathery whisper passing as the heron over the meadow to the pond, wing beats slowing, lifting, shifting, marking a life. I am saying nothing as tenderly as I can. A lily opening on any pond, any lily, a pulse, a pulsar, starlight pouring millennia at a glance. All this rising and falling, all this tunneling, the anthills of perception. All of this, sweet sips of here, now, look, this, yes, then gone. Thank you all so much. Thank you. Peace, love, and poetry, everyone.
Just taking a breath. I'm just taking a breath because I can. I'm mesmerized as I always am, and as I think most people are when they get to hear your work, the care and where we get to travel in the natural world. It's as if I've never seen, and some of the things I have never seen before. So I get to see them for the first time, but those things I've seen before, I learn I've never seen when I hear your poems cast their spells through memory and time and connection. I think about you pulling that line from the journal from Oklahoma, all those years ago, to bring forth that history and to make it alive again. There's such life in these poems, and that is what I come back to over and over again in the collection. The collection is the Mayapple forest. It's a forest if you'll never forget encountering as you did today here on Cultivating Voices, live poetry. Thank you so much, Kim Parsons. I know what I'm heading toward next, our next poet. And so I feel I can confidently say, even though I haven't heard Liz All utter a word of her poetry today, that can y'all four just come back every month together and read the new book showcases? I would love to hear this reading. And thankfully we get to come back to the readings. A reminder, you can always revisit any reading you've attended through the care of Don Krieger, who curates all the readings for us into posterity. Well, a reading that we're about to hear that we'll be very grateful that we will have for posterity on our program. We will be hearing from Liz All. Oh boy, I have lived a lifetime of poetry with Liz. And I can confidently say, my poetry would be nowhere without Liz's poetry. I know that. I'm like so grateful. I'm so grateful for everything I have learned from listening and reading and talking with Liz about poetry over the years. So every opportunity I have to experience a new collection is worthy of every ounce of celebration I have in my cells to share. And so I'm ecstatic today to be able to introduce her with her new collection. And I look forward to every poem I ever get to hear of hers. I know you all will experience the same today. Well, let me go to the formal biography of Liz All. These folks that I have known for a time, I try not to embarrass them on the program with my weird things that I say. But so let me go to the biography. Liz All is the author of A Case for Solace, Beating the Bounds, Home Economics, Talking About the Weather, Luck, and A Thirst That's Partly Mine, which was the winner of the 2007 Slapering Hall Press chapbook contest. Her poems have appeared everywhere, numerous literary journals, including Prairie Schooner, Sinister Wisdom, Measure, Rogue Agent, West Trestle Review, Nimrod and Crab Orchard Review, and in anthologies like Outer Space, 100 Poems. And one of the anthologies we've been proud to feature here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, Nasty Women Poets, an unapologetic anthology of subversive verse. She's been awarded residencies at Playa, Gentel, the Kimmel Harding Nelson Center for the Arts, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Writers Colony at Derry Hollow. She teaches writing at Plymouth State University in Plymouth, New Hampshire. Liz read in our very, very first Cultivating Voices live poetry reading ever. And so I always have a place in my heart for you when you come and read on our program. And thank you for closing out today's most amazing, amazing new book showcase. And congratulations on the new book from Lily Poetry.
Thanks, Sandy. Can you hear me okay? Thumbs up. Okay, thanks. So thank you very much for the invitation. Also, thank you for putting me last. Frequently, because of my last name, I appear first, which I don't mind, but it's such a pleasure to hear everybody else, although it threw me into a new place because I've switched out 2 of my poems because I wanted to like respond a little bit to the poets. And I think that's a poetry reading idea. Somebody already figured out and is doing this, but like where you have like 2 or 3 poets read, and then you have the last poet who's like the respondent to the poets, like at an academic conference, only cooler because it's poetry. So I have a total of 8 poems. And the first one is a switcheroo. It is going out to Andrea and to Sinead. It's going out to Andrea because this is my Slapering Hall Press chapbook. So hello, press sibling. This was out 15 years ago. It's not its birthday today, but it's here to tell happy birthday to your collection. And to Sinead because birds. So, and this also happens to be the title poem. This is called Bird Bath. As morning coffee burbles in its dull chrome pot, I fill the bird bath on the deck, startling a gang of wild turkeys skulking in the yard. By midday, the sunlit water, broken by the fitful bathing of chickadees, throws shards of its own light against the house. At dusk, one cobalt wasp sips at the stilled shore. I want to give this one small thing, a drink and a bath, cool and fresh and well-drawn, daily waters for a thirst that's partly mine. If one day I forget, these tiny neighborhood creatures will still find what they need. I am nothing more than luck to them, only they don't call it luck. The rest of the poem, thank you. See your clapping hands, I appreciate that, thank you. The rest of the poems are gonna be from my new book. It was out in October of 2022 called A Case for Solace from Lily Poetry Review Books. This is the first poem in the book. Attendance. Each class meeting since you died, I've paused for a moment before marking you absent, tasting the loss another time, turning it over and over against my teeth. To make no mark at all seems cowardly, but to mark you present would be incorrect, except in a metaphorical sense, I'm still too angry and sad to entertain. You're not here, tall, thin stretch of you, folded into the ridiculous desk, and you'll never be back. And I've asked myself as I ticked the box on the roster, how present were you that last day, that last class, mere hours before you gave yourself to the river? Surely some part of you was already crossing the parking lot into the woods, finding a path to the Pemigewasset, testing that water. How absurd, though, to keep recording your absence as if evidence might be needed, as if such rote accounting could ever reconcile. And yet I'm thrown today when I discover on the electronic roster that you are finally deceased. The letters of your name in black now, unlike the other students, their names still blue and underlined, meaning their links are live. I can click on them and go somewhere. Lupin, for those who don't know, is a plant. It's like a tall spear-like plant with purple blossoms that we see a lot in there's a certain lupin season up here in New England. I imagine other places as well. This is called Driving Home from a Funeral Service. Each velvet spear of lupin, a steeple. Each profusion of lilacs or explosion of sparrows from the road's edge, laden to sopping with consolation. I bat them all away like black flies, because they too want my blood, like death wants my blood. At last, a pummeled rabbit carcass, a hymn of wet fur and snapped bones splayed on the yellow dividing line, offers its weird balm. Right before the pandemic started, like a month before things got, I mean, who knows when exactly, it's in February of 2020, I spent some unexpected, unplanned time in the hospital and got some poems from that. And this is one of them. This is called On the 9th Morning in the Hospital. 2 rugged, cheerful X-ray techs arrive with news that they are finally here for that hip X-ray. No, I say, not me. I'm not here for my hip. Still shielded by their own radiant smiles, they check the room number. 14, 14, this is the room, they are certain. And for one uncanny moment, I suppose I must be wrong. Somehow I'm here for my hip, but which one? Not my traitorous lungs or my stupid mutant blood that wants to clot and clot. But then they realize, no, aha, wrong patient, wrong room, so sorry. They back out, grinning. Yeah, you sure don't look like you were born in 1939, ha ha. And I'm adrift in some wash between lingering concern for my hip, but which, and a low surge of even fake flattery's reliable balm. Why, yes, thank you. No, I am not 80. Thanks for noticing. Ha ha, I'm not that old. Ha ha. And then they carry their good news elsewhere. But my hands remain pressed, one to each hip, pressed as questions, and my body, warming beneath them, won't yet venture even a hesitant answer. School for grieving. Some suggested it was my own father's death, not even 3 weeks gone, finally catching me. But even as we sat together, the poetry class incomplete in a circle on the grass in front of the school building, minutes after the official confirmation, even as we sat there stunned beneath the tree you'd climbed just a week or so ago, even as we sat there not having class, having instead that unpoetic silence and those tears, I knew this grief was its own undisguised creature, knew what I was tasting for the first time in the salt of my sorrow was your own grief, how it insisted on the river. Years later, I still cross it twice a day. Even now, it will sometimes slip a bitter spoonful of its silt past my teeth, down my suddenly tightening throat. this poem is set, and this is important only because it sort of gets alluded to in the poem, is set in a town named Cannon in Georgia, and it's C-A-N-O-N, so not like the gun, but like the literary canon, or in this case, the biblical canon, like canonical biblical law, you know, like Leviticus and stuff. This is called Abide, Cannon, Georgia. At first, I don't notice the thin white braid, most of it tucked away like contraband into the well-pressed collar of the old man waiting in line for peaches in front of me. Does his wife, snapped shut purse secured in the crook of her elbow, insist on that short-sleeved button-up starched over an undershirt shirt, even in this July heat? I invent a sternness in her, a shaming. How she makes him hide his braid because she can't abide what folks might think of it, of them in their town named for biblical law. Not until the line starts moving do I reconsider, allowing that maybe what his wife can't abide is the thought of cutting it off, having woven it daily, gently, smoothed and tied and laid it down between his shoulder blades for decades now. Her fingertips against his neck's soft skin, gathering the plate that won't be seen by anybody else, her joy alone. Could be he's even growled at her to cut it off some morning when he noticed a wince she couldn't hide, sensed a stiffness in her braiding hands. How easily I bound two strangers in a secret shame. How quickly from the same threads a more tender tether emerges. Each version a figment I stitched while waiting for peaches. A few yards back in line, reader, you might wonder what I can be trusted to see, to tell. All right, so I have two more from the book. And this one that I'm going to read now, Kim, I didn't want you to think I forgot you in the poem dedication, send out, switch up situation. So this one, as you read your Ella Fitzgerald poem, I thought, oh, well, I'll read this one. So this one goes out to you in gratitude, Kim. And the title of this poem leads right into the poem. Oh, and the song she's singing is Natural Woman. I don't know why I feel that's important. At the 2015 Kennedy Center Honors, Aretha drops her fur coat to the stage as if it is the whole fallen world sliding from her shoulders, as if not even the weight of the minor seventh chords can keep her joyful arms from praising to the rafters. She sprouts wings from her gilt cap sleeves, as if she's showing up the ghost of James Brown, as if that's her president up there in the balcony catching some spirit, which puny you and I can only hope to touch as we dissolve into a pool of gold at her feet where we belong. I think you can still see that on YouTube. It's worth a Google of her doing Natural Woman at the 2015 Kennedy Center Honors. It is transcendent, so joyful. So Thank you, everybody at Cultivating Voices Live. I know many hands make for lighter work, but I know it's still a lot of work and a lot of labor of love, but also, you know, labor. But especially Sandy, who I think everyone would agree, like, it's just like, we'd pay to just have you introduce us, Sandy. Like, it's just such a pleasure to just be introduced by you. It is just so loving and wonderful. So thanks for that, as always. So this last one, I guess, maybe I'll be seeing some of you at AWP. Maybe some of you will be traveling there or traveling elsewhere. This is from the book, and it's called For My Fellow Travelers at the End of the Day-Long Trip. For the too tall former baseball pitcher with the bad shoulder, downing whiskeys as fast as the flight attendants can pour them on his flight to his father in hospice. For the chorus of babies at baggage claim, and for their toddler elders melting down, having collectively reached the ends of their tiny ropes, screaming in exhausted call and response. For the woman who stepped off the curb and into the slush to pound her small fist against the dirty side of the last departing Greyhound to Portland, making it stop for the bundled pair 50 yards back. And for the driver who stows their luggage in the salted underbelly. For the scruffy, too thin 20-something who boarded my bus in Concord, reeking of fresh, sticky weed, wearing a cloud of it, possibly transporting a few pounds of it, who nodded into the tepid light of his cell phone, spine curled like a man 4 times his age. For those who got up early to give us lifts, and for those who wait for us now in the garish or spooky terminals, or outside, stomping and pacing to keep warm in the boring dark next to the small town gas station. I hope I won't forget the way the glow of that scruffy kid's phone lit up his sleepy face, showing me how he must always look to those who love him best. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sad the reading's over. I'm just sad now, but I'm happy. I'm happy and I'm sad. You understand how it goes with me. Everybody, that's Liz All. The new book is A Case for Solace. And I applaud you for doing the switcheroo. And I'm glad I was able to break the cycle of you going first, because I know what it's like to go last, right? I totally understand that situation. But what I really appreciate about what I heard, what you were able to do in this reading today also is really take us back also to that echo of the grief factory that Andrea was talking about too, and do it with that precision of how you look at the natural world as well, and how you bring people into it in a way that I would never be able to enter it otherwise. I mean, that's the spell that poetry, I think, casts on us. And that's why I've loved listening to your poetry for years, to be spellbound by your words, the way you put things together, and the sheer, Kim mentioned it, the sheer craft of how you put together a poem. Amazing. Well, my friends, we've went a little over today. I'm sure it's well worth it. I'd like to take a moment to thank all 4 of our readers today for our first reading of March, which here in the States, Women's History Month, us beginning to celebrate, was such a perfect reading to launch us into this month. Thank you so much to Andrea Deeken, Sinead McClure, Tim Parsons, and Liz All. Would you take a moment, please, everyone, to unmute and show your abiding appreciation for these amazing voices and poems that we heard today.
Brava!
Thank you.
Across the pond, Sinead. Yeah.
Indeed. Well, everyone, I want to thank everyone here in Zoom joining us today live for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. As I mentioned, you've been listening to our new books showcase, a little switcheroo of our own for this month. It's our new book showcase is usually the second Sunday of the month, but we know that a number of folks here in the room, and of course, thousands of people will be traveling to Seattle this upcoming week and weekend to attend the Associated Writing Program's annual conference. And we really wanted to showcase have our showcase not be eclipsed by the eclipse of all the poetry readings that folks will be able to attend this upcoming week. So thank you so much for casting us off into the month of March and with just this wonderful new books showcase that we were able to feature today. A reminder that we will still be here next Sunday, everyone. We will be focusing on our Poets Focus open mic. Our word is sister. Bring your poems that evoke the sisterhood, the sister you have, the sister you don't have, like anything related to sister. And we'll be back for our open mic and a reminder that our third reading of this month of March will be devoted to World Poetry Day, and we will have some featured poets as well as you from around the world on the open mic. Well, everyone, as we close out today's reading, I want to just invite you to definitely share. If you're heading to AWP, I look forward. Stop me anywhere you see me. I don't have a table. Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, we don't have a table this time around, but I'll be hanging out a lot at Salmon Poetry's booth 911 with the Salmon Poets and all the books therein. And of course, I hope to see so many of you that are here with us live, that are going to the conference, and those of you who may be watching this reading that are getting ready to attend to AWP, please do stop by. It'd be such a great joy to reconnect in person with you if we've met in person before. But if we've not met in person before, I will be so overjoyed to spend some time with all of you at the conference at AWP. Well, that's it for today. And again, a reminder to please do purchase the books if you have the resources today. Support these 4 amazing poets as well as their presses and our important way that we use poetry to connect reconnect and come to understand the worlds plural that we live in, and to continue to make sense with each other through poetry. I always close out the readings by telling you all to, please do take very good care of yourselves, take exquisite care of your beloveds, and of course, look what happens when you write your remarkable poems. We get to witness and experience that labor of love every time we come together. So continue that labor of love. And as Liz mentioned, if you are traveling to Seattle for the conference, safe travels to all. And we certainly do look forward to seeing you around the Seattle Convention Center and around the city of Seattle. And of course, we look forward to seeing you next time you're able to join us here live in Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Thank you again to Andrea, Sinead, Kim, and Liz, and we will see you all next time. Be well.